So I think what we've all experienced over the last 18 months is really witnessing how ESG has skyrocketed and how the adoption and acceptance around this topic has reached a critical mass. And in response to this explosion in demand, what RepRisk has done is really double down on our focus on ESG risks and really trying to work to expand the breadth and the depth of the data that we provide to clients to meet this heightened interest. So just some examples of some of the things that we've been working on. So we're expanding our research scope on an ongoing basis to add new ESG hot topics that are of interest to our clients and that are in line with recent developments. For example, we added racism and racial inequality. We added pandemics. Another thing that we've been working on is expanding our framework mapping. So what we do is we map our data to the key sustainability ESG frameworks that are out there. In 2020, we rolled out our SASB feature, mapping our data to the SASB materiality map. This year, we mapped to the Sustainable Development Goals, and we launched a risk lens on the SDGs. Another very exciting thing that we've worked on recently is launching a Jupyter Notebook, a website where there's live code and a sample data set that users can play with, can use to customize ESG scores, and can use to build sample portfolios. And that's a very exciting development in this as we talk more and more about transparency in the ESG space. And we see this type of features being an important component in the ESG toolkit. And we'll be working more on developing that in the coming months. To state it simply, RepRisk is the only ESG data provider to systematically cover private companies. And we've covered private companies from day one, so close to 15 years ago when we got started. Our database today has ESG risk profiles on over 180,000 companies, including companies in emerging and frontier markets. And the vast majority of those companies are private companies. So 85 to 90% are private companies. So we've been working with the private equity sector for a very long time to support them on their ESG integration efforts. Well, first, let me start by saying that RepRisk has what I consider to be a beautifully simple approach to ESG. So we focus on systematically identifying and assessing ESG risks that can have material, financial, compliance, and reputational implications. And when we look at our client base in the private market space, we primarily see three use cases of our data. The first is due diligence. So really identifying ESG risks early as part of that due diligence process before that client makes an acquisition or an investment. The second key use case is post-transaction monitoring. So after that made that investment in a company or acquired that company, they can stay on top of any emerging risks on a daily basis through the use of the RepRisk system. And the third use case is a more recent one, where we see clients really using ESG data from RepRisk as a value creation tool. So really using it to engage with their portfolio companies and support them on their own sustainability journey. And with the idea that ESG is a long-term value driver, it's really a win-win situation for both parties involved, that private equity company and the portfolio company. So the private equity asset class has grown exponentially the last decade. I believe it's more than doubled to about 3.4 trillion in 2020. And with that growth, there's also been a big mindset shift when it comes to ESG, both at the LP level and at the GP level. Despite that progress, it's still a long way to go. Only about 10% or so of private equity firms today are signatories of the UN Principles for Responsible Investment. And there's an opportunity for private equity firms because they can bypass some of the growing pains that the public equity space has gone through when it comes to ESG integration. And RepRisk is really uniquely positioned to support private equity players when it comes to this work of ESG integration. We can help provide consistent, robust, reliable data that provides them the coverage and the timeliness they need in the fast-moving world.